by Senator Padilla. It'll be item 1 on the agenda. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Let me begin by thanking the committee staff for their work on this bill. And I want to begin by accepting the amendment recommended in the analysis, but if I may, with an important clarification. The way I read the analysis said to delete these terms "and others" and replace it with the Seismic Safety Commission. I definitely want to formalize and include the Seismic Safety Commission as one of the people for the Office of Emergency Services to collaborate with, but not at the exclusion of other potential partners. I think in conversations that's sort of the intent, but the way I read the specific language offered the amendment, it wasn't.
You're correct in your analysis, sir.
Okay, because I think that also will allay some of the questions and concerns that members of the committee raised, both about public sector collaborators as well as potentially private sector collaborators, which we've been open to every step of the way. So in a nutshell, what this bill is seeking to do is recognize that as Californians, we know all too well that it's not a matter of if there will be a next big earthquake in the state of California, but when the next big one will strike. And it's not just a matter of something that measures 6 point something or 7 point something or more on the Richter scale, but the injuries that accompany big earthquakes, the fatalities that accompany big earthquakes, and the multi-millions, if not billions of dollars in loss that accompanies large earthquakes, particularly in our urban centers. This bill would designate the Office of Emergency Services in collaboration with all the entities that are enumerated in the bill to establish an early warning system, and by January 1st of 2016 to have secured funding for the system. Cost estimates for an early warning system in California have been at about $80 million, not in year one, but $80 million over a couple of years to establish something that is functional and helpful to the public. For those of us who have lived through some big ones, we know what even 30 to 60 seconds could do to be able to take cover, help protect loved ones, power down machinery and industrial environments, stop trains in safer locations, all that we can do to try to minimize loss, minimize fatalities, minimize injuries. How we fund it at the end of the day is, in my mind, secondary, more than open to a federal-state partnership, more than open to a public-private partnership. But I think that we ought to put this initiative codified in statute to make it a priority for the state and bring the public safety benefit of an early warning system to the public sooner rather than later. With me in support is Peggy Hellwig, Operations Manager at Berkeley Seismological Laboratory, amongst other supporters.
Move the bill.
The bill's been moved and seconded by Mr. Joan Sawyer. Please, and by the way, let's keep in mind this is a do-pass recommendation from the chair. You may begin with your testimony.
I'm Dr. Peggy Hellwig. I'm here in my capacity as Chief Seismologist and Operations Manager of the Berkeley Seismological Laboratory. We represent UC Berkeley's contribution to the partnership that is California Integrated Seismic Network, California's Earthquake Information System. From the experience of our colleagues in Japan and other countries, we know that earthquake early warning is possible and that provides great benefits to society in terms of reducing loss of life and improving resilience. Within the California Integrated Seismic Network, we are currently operating a demonstration early warning system and working with partners and beta users such as the San Francisco Department of Emergency Management, the LA Office of Emergency Services, and the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. With them, we're exploring applications of the early warning system and delivery mechanisms that would help them improve resilience and reduce loss of life. We stand in support of Senator Alex Padilla's Bill 135 to implement an early warning system for the state of California. The science for an early warning system is ready now. It would be a shame to wait for a full implementation of an earthquake early warning system until the lessons learned from the deaths and destruction after the next big earthquake in California show us that it should have been done. Thank you.
Very well.
I'm the
Government Relations Director in the Office of the President of the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. I want to thank Senator Padilla, who introduced his bill actually in the Caltech Seismological Library at the beginning of this year. We sincerely appreciate it, along with the Assembly co-sponsors of this bill. This is the first major tool for public services and private use that's come into place in the field of earthquakes in 15 years. And we have been working along with a number of public and private partners. Caltech is a private university. We've worked with the University of California, Berkeley, as well as the Moore Foundation, which has been a very generous supporter of a 3-year grant that is actually working directly with the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a first between a foundation and a federal agency. I also work the Washington front on this bill, and in fact the House and the Senate have committees have approved appropriations for the U.S. Geological Survey this year. As might be predicted, the House total bill is less than the Senate, but what's interesting is the language in those bills. In both cases, references are made both by the House, where it says the committee urges the survey, USGS, to continue to develop an earthquake early warning prototype system on the West Coast, and on the Senate side, dedicating actually additional money to develop, expand, and improve early earthquake warnings for earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, and coastal storms. We take this as a positive in the midst of a very difficult time in Washington, and we urge you to be supportive of SB135.
Next.
Maxine Mantel on behalf of the City of West Hollywood in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, other members, Paul Yoder on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco and the Office of Mayor Ed Lee in support of the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, David Jones on behalf of the cities of Pasadena and Burbank in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Sylvia Solisha on behalf of the cities of Beverly Hills and Los Angeles, and on behalf of the Board of Supervisors of the County of San Luis Obispo in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Mr. Chair and members, Jason Murphy on behalf of the University of California, along with my colleagues here from UC Berkeley, as well as our other faculty across the UC system. We're pleased to be in support today.
Thank you.
Rosie Thompson with Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, also in support.
Thank you. All right, opposition?
No, Mr. Chairman and members, Jerry Haliva on behalf of Seismic Warning Systems. We're not in opposition. We've actually been in support of this bill all the way through the process and been privileged to work with Senator Padilla. We commend what he's trying to accomplish in this legislation because it's important. However, there's an omission in the bill that we would like to see recognized, and that is that there are currently in place public-private partnerships working on earthquake warning in both Riverside County and Coachella Valley, larger Coachella Valley, and in Imperial County. And we think that those public-private partnerships that already exist at the local level ought to be recognized in Senator Padilla's legislation because as we're advising Cal, EMA, and OES to go forward, we think it's an important component to have that local public-private partnership recognized. So that's all we were suggesting is we think it's an improvement to the bill. I discussed it with Mark Villaducci, who heads OES now, and he also thinks that's an improvement. He told me that. So we think it would be an advantage to the bill.
Thank you. Next.
Scott Nebenzahl with Seismic Warning Systems, their Government Affairs Director and Vice President. I want to echo what Mr. Haliva has said and only add that our participation in the working group process on this, we view this bill as a work in progress with additional recommendations may be forthcoming.
All right. Is there any opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Chesbro.
I have a question, possibly comment. Do we have any, what's the projection in terms of how much warning systems like this are likely to provide?
How much?
How long in advance would we actually?
I'll let the technical experts sort of follow up, but from my understanding, the briefings I've been a part of, it is a direct function of your proximity to the epicenter. You know, when you measure the distance between the primary wave and the secondary waves that are emanating from the epicenter outwards, in some places it's only a couple of seconds, but it's upwards of 30, 45, 60 seconds, if not more. If an earthquake is epicentered in downtown San Francisco, that's one thing. But we're a big state, and something that could emanate from the Central Valley as the waves are propagating outwards. I think by the time that message hits our urban centers, we could do a significant amount in terms of saving and preventing damage and loss.
So the amount of warning would be between 0 and up to 60 seconds for an earthquake. For an earthquake that starts, for example, next to Salton Sea, and for the effects to be felt in Los Angeles. The people in the Salton Sea would have very, very little warning.
Well, I'd just like to point out a potentially additional benefit in addition to the obvious benefits that you've stated, and that is that it's been demonstrated that off of Northern California from the Bay North, there's a seismic situation that's nearly identical, a mirror image of what exists off of Japan. And the difference is, though, that the seismically active area where, I guess, 300 or 400 years ago, there was a similar quake and tsunami, has been documented. The warning time because it's so much closer to the coast, is somewhere in the neighborhood of perhaps 15 or 20 minutes. And so if this were to be tied in with a tsunami warning, it would add, even if it was only a minute, it would undoubtedly save more lives in terms of people being able to move out of the tsunami zone as well. So it just seems like just like with an earthquake, there's ripples that go out. It seems like there's multiple potential benefits going forward.
Right. No, and there's just been discussion at the federal level already about not just a California system, but a West Coast system. But while we wait for fiscal cliff and sequester conversations and debt ceiling conversations and all that to maybe move some of the federal money, we can't count on that. We can't count on that sort of near term. And I don't think we should wait. If we can find a way to move forward as a state, and then others will add on and catch up, and I think we ought to do that.
All right. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for bringing this bill forward. I live in the area that's predicted to be, if there is a next big one, it would be most likely in the San Andreas Fault area by the Salton Sea going into the area that I live in, the Coachella Valley. And there's a system, some people have testified earlier, that's actively engaged with the Association of Governments in the area. And I think it goes to the issue on the analysis on page 3 where it talks about the difference between a single station and a network approach.
Right.
And maybe some of your witnesses can talk about that. Or my question really is, are we prejudging which system you want to use here? Because I think the one in Coachella Valley uses the single station approach as opposed to the network approach. And my understanding is the single station gives you a quicker response in the immediate area as opposed to a maybe more accurate response in a wider, further area.
Right. We're not prescribing the system itself in the legislation. What the bill would do is not only make the project itself a priority, but have OES and the technical experts make those sorts of decisions. And in all likelihood, it'll be a combination at the end of the day.
Were you going to say something?
Yes. As a resident of Desert Hot Springs, right on the border of your district, and also the propagator of about 140 small seismic stations around the Coachella Valley, I'm acutely aware of your concern. The big issue with regard to this is that it's a public system. It is supported by the federal government. It also is supported by the state government in a modest way at about a 15-to-1 leveraged ratio of federal dollars to state dollars. The advantage of a statewide system was recognized back in 2001 when the Northern and Southern California seismic networks were merged into the California Integrated Seismic Network, and in fact that was tested rather severely, and what caused it was actually the breakdown of communications in the north during the Loma Prieta earthquake. The advantage of having a statewide system doesn't mean there can't be other systems in addition to it, is to be able to notify people farthest away as soon as possible after an earthquake. The denser the system, which is essentially what the $80 million pays for, the better the scientists are able to identify the immediate source and the high probability risk down the line of that fault when a quake breaks.
And I'm taking the Senator as word. You made the statement that I appreciate you making, that it's an open process going forward and not prejudging one.
Absolutely. There was a concern, prior to committee today that either private sector potential partners or even these public-private collaborations would be excluded or prohibited. Nothing in the bill would preclude OES from working with any of the parties that you've mentioned.
I appreciate that.
Assemblywoman Waldron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up Assemblymember Nastandi's questions, I represent part of Riverside County, so I was also concerned. I didn't want any of the groups that were already operating to not be recognized in this process as it goes forward. But my second question is, as far as you'll be securing, hopefully, funding by January 2016, at that point, how much longer out would implementation be? I know there's a lot of land area to cover and a lot of science involved. I mean, what are we looking at as far as when it would be operational?
So two-part answer. I'll do the first. We don't need the entire 80 to get started. I think with about $20 million, we can get the work going, knowing fairly confidently that the balance is sort of on the way. But from getting started, we're talking, about, 2 years?
2 years is the minimum.
2 years minimum. To have the system in place where we begin to reliably provide the public that sort of warning. Some signals and warnings are already in place, sort of not privately, but within utilities and others. But
so we're currently in this demonstration mode where an important part of the difference between demonstration and real is that our system is not as robust as it would need to be in case of an early warning system. With the networks that we have today, we can provide very good warnings for the San Francisco area and the Los Angeles area. We would be improving our seismic coverage in the outlying areas where we currently have many fewer stations, but part of our upgrade, the planned upgrades to the system are adding more instrumentations, but another big part of it is to make the system as a whole much more robust, since we're running on shoestrings or even less right now.
So not a year, but definitely, significantly less than a decade. I'll just underscore, the longer we wait, then the longer it's going to take to have it in place, and the higher the likelihood of a big one happening without the system in place. I don't want to be in that position where the public is saying, wait a minute, we could have done something to prevent loss of life or all this damage. I think it behooves us to move forward sooner rather than later. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Jones-Sawyer.
And thank you, State Senator Padilla, for bringing this. As a former emergency preparedness coordinator for the city of Los Angeles, who was in the 1994 earthquake, as you well know, where Mayor Dick Reardon was the first person in the EOC after the earthquake, and I was the third person. If we had had just an inkling that this was going to happen, I know firsthand what we could have done to save lives, properties, ahead of time. If it were not for the leadership of the mayor and the city council, we would not have recovered as well as we did. But I think it was always embarrassing as I was trained in emergency preparedness, and I would go to Washington and to Emmitsburg and different places to get trained. Other people had early warning systems for hurricanes and tsunamis and anything you could think of, and we had nothing. And it just never made any sense that we never invested in an early warning system. It was just ridiculous. And as Californians, being the trailblazers, we should have started this process a long time ago. And so I commend you. I would love to be honored to be a co-author to this legislation, and hopefully we can get this through today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooley, then Mr. Salas.
Senator, great bill. I think one of the tough things in this general area is a lot of California earthquakes tend to have a shallower epicenter, which means the distance between where the earthquake starts and the surface is not that far. Typically in California, you have Northridge, you have Loma Prieta. They compare them with earthquakes elsewhere of a similar magnitude, and they say California's more destructive just because they're closer to the surface. This means when you have something like the Northridge, which is a direct hit on an urban area, you're not going to have a lot of time. But I think these are very important systems. We do have, some of our most at-risk faults are very remote from the urban areas, even though they can produce dramatic shaking. The southern San Andreas and others, for example. So this sort of warning system will help. I do want to note that I think the amendment the revision of the amendment you sought to keep that and others. Generally you look at the American business sector, they are much more attentive these days to where they put their places of business. It's a risk management decision. They don't want the enterprise at risk because of foreseeable hazards. So there's definitely much more of a mindset in American business of all types to kind of the risk management element. And I think the and others language in a bill that expressly says you'd like to find some private funding if possible to support this so it doesn't disappear, it does open the door both for experienced private vendors who've been working in this general area, who may have expertise on specific facets of the bill dealing with sensors, how you install them, telemetry systems, distribution paths of information. The private vendors may have insights on some of those issues that this bill will go after. But it also opens the door for some of our larger manufacturers that may have some skin in the game if they could get an early notice that would help them to start adjusting their operations to prevent destruction that they didn't have to pay for. You might get the revenue stream to kind of help. And obviously if you get the network in place and if it supports our strong economic sector, our manufacturing sectors and others, it's going to benefit everybody. So I think the and others language actually helps figure out how you might get some private sector funding. So I think it's very important.
Thank you.
Mr. Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Padilla, thank you for bringing this measure forward. And I just had a quick question. I don't know, maybe you can take a first crack at it, but maybe some of your experts. Because I know as mentioned earlier, Japan has an early warning system. There's other countries like Italy, Mexico, Turkey, and China that are developing some. But I also know in California we have I believe it's integrated seismic network, if that's correct. But where are we in relations to, like, say, what Japan had in 2011 when they had their earthquake and they sent out notices to everybody? Where are we at in California?
Don't have that.
I'll defer to technical experts to sort of make that comparison contrast for you.
Thank you.
So after the Kobe earthquake in 1995, the Japanese invested heavily in their seismic infrastructure to make it, quote, as good as what was available in California, unquote. And as a result, their system is now much better than ours. And after they had improved the system and then done a lot of tests and done a lot of public education, they opened up their earthquake early warning system in 2007. In the meantime, the funding for the California networks has not gone up. It's actually gone down a little bit, so that while we're still running the networks, providing earthquake information, we're working hard under somewhat adverse conditions because always funding to the networks has come after the big earthquake. We should have. And in that respect, this proposal is, I think, a very good proposal because it will improve overall our capability for monitoring earthquakes and doing all of the other things we need to do with that information, such as improving building codes and preparing the buildings to respond better where they are. So it's actually an overall win-win situation. With good networks, we can provide the early warnings, which we can't do yet, essentially only in a demonstration system to show that it does work in real time in California, but not with the robust network that we need.
Gotcha. So in addition to like the building codes, but the notification will happen not just on TV, but say I could get a text message like I do an Amber Alert.
So part of the step from a demonstration system to a public system is to find the reliable means to publicize the information. And with BART, for example, we're working on, if you have only a few seconds, you want the action for you as an industry or an infrastructure operator to be automatic, not wait for the people to decide, oh my God, something's going on, I have to respond. So BART, as part of our demonstration process, is slowing down trains when they get information from us about earthquakes, for example.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to move the bill if it hasn't
been properly moved and second. No other questions. Madam Secretary, please call the rolls. Do pass recommendation from the chair. Well, with the amendments.
Yes.
Very well.
Hall.
Yes.
Hall, aye. Nastandy?
Aye.
Nastandy, aye. Bigelow? Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Chesbro. Chesbro, aye. Cooley. Gray. Hagman. Hagman, aye. Hernandez. Jones. Jones Sawyer.
Aye.
Jones Sawyer, aye. Levine. Levine, aye. Medina. Medina, aye. Perea. Perez. Perez, aye. Salas. Salas, aye. Waldron. Waldron, aye.
Call the
Hernandez,
absent
aye.
members.
Bigelow, aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's out.
Okay, that bill is out. Congratulations, Senator. Thank you. All right, next we will hear file item 3, SB 472 by Senator Hill.